We got a bidet!
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's Shoot the Sheev podcast, we are now talking about Rogue One. We've been kind of going through the movies ever so often with our Shoot the Sheevs, and here we are at Rogue One. So what we'll do in this podcast is the first little segment here. We'll talk about, kind of what was going on during the time when this movie came out, and then we'll talk about some tough love, some things we liked, and then some wrap up. So as far as what was going on when this movie came out, well, we had one Star Wars movie that came out before this one that was produced by Disney. And so this was our first impression of what would a Star Wars movie look like that is not part of the main series. So, it had a lot to live up to, especially since it was something different. And they actually went, for a plot line that was somewhat basic, but they did quite a bit with it. And the only thing that they were going off of that we were told is, this is how the rebels acquired the Death Star plans. Like, how did Leia get them in the beginning of A New Hope and put him inside R2, all that good stuff. And also there's a bunch of memes that were floating around that really showed who was a true Star Wars fan and who wasn't. There were ones that were saying many Bonthans died, and it's like, no, that is from Return of the Jedi's Death Star plans, not this one. So that's why in Rogue One we don't see a whole bunch of Bonthans murdered. It's a completely different story. You look like you wanted to say something.
I don't even know what word you're saying.
Oh, well, that's all right.
What are they?
This is a species.
What do they look like?
I don't remember. I think they look like that elf character. Alf, not elf. I think that's what Bonthans look like.
Okay.
But yeah, so this was the first. Yeah, I just looked it up. They kind of look like Alf. First movie made by Disney that wasn't in the episode series. A couple things were going on with this. One is it was brand new, but also two, merchandising. We talk about with Star Wars, merchandising is huge. When George Lucas had control of Star Wars, merchandising was like his bread and butter after making the movie. Like, the movie would make a bunch of money, and then he would also make a ton of money off of merchandising because he was very smart in how he did it all. Honestly, this is kind of where merchandising fell apart. I cannot tell you how many Rogue One figures I saw that were just left on the shelves and then eventually made their way to the clearance rack. Let alone, I remember when we saw this movie, when we left the theaters, I hardly remembered anybody's name. I don't know about you. I mean, even to a point, I still don't know very many people's names, just because they're not mentioned a lot. Like, they don't say each other's names very often, but also the names are just kind of out there as well. They don't roll off the tongue like Anakin or Qui-Gon or something. It's a bit more unique than stuff like that. I think my favorite character that came out of this movie was K2SO, which is behind Sarah there. We get to learn more about Imperial droid security guards, so to speak. We did see this movie in IMAX, and I remember the crowd being full. It was very exciting. Thankfully, the time that we went, it was very different than The Force Awakens, because I remember when we saw Force Awakens at IMAX, somebody spoiled the movie as they walked out, and nobody did that this time. Do you remember anything about Rogue One and when we were going to see the movie?
Not really. I think of all the Star Wars movies you and I have seen, actually in theaters, really the only one I remember is when we got introduced to the Porgs.
Wow, interesting.
I,
Considering
I remember stuff from the movies, but in terms of like my movie going experience, that's really the only kind of thing that I remember.
gotcha. Which is interesting because, in my opinion, that's the one that was the worst out of all the Disney produced Star Wars films. Yes, I said that. The Last Jedi is the worst one. Okay. So, like I said, merchandising, it really tanked and it honestly set in motion the rest of the way. Like, after this collapse happened with merchandising, um, The Last Jedi came out and merchandising was okay for that one. Um, but then Solo, it really, really tanked again. And ever since then, there's hardly anything in the stores anymore. Really, if you want some sort of collectible, like how we collect Black Series figures, or if you want to get really nice lightsabers, honestly, you have to either pre-order or get it from Disney World or Disneyland, one of the parks, because a lot of the lightsabers they have now are insanely expensive. Like I think they're on borderline $300 a saber if you want to get it from Hasbro. Whereas Disney, you can buy the hilt and the blade separate. So once you buy a blade, you don't have to buy another one, and then you can just purchase the hilt. Um, Even when those really expensive ones go on sale, it's like still like 250-ish. So you have to rely on lightsabers, mostly from Disney nowadays, especially accurate ones. But yeah, I digress a little bit because we're going a little off topic. Um, so let's see. There were some really cool things, some all right things. Without getting into like too specific, how did you feel about the movie? Like, what do you remember? Maybe first impressions or just how you feel about it in general?
Um, it's an okay movie. I don't remember thinking this is terrible, but I also don't remember like, yeah, this was awesome, you know? It kind of almost has like a heartstring tugging fairy tale type ending to it, if you will. And being that that's kind of the ending to the movie, it kind of stuck with me a bit more than probably the rest of it did. I feel like since watching Andor, the TV show, I have a better understanding of this movie. I know we recently watched this movie just to kind of refresh everything in our brains for this podcast. And so this was the first time I'd watched it since watching Andor, the TV show. So I feel like I probably understood a bit more of it than I did before seeing Andor, just from some of the character relationship standpoints. So I feel like that kind of helped me be able to take a deeper dive into the movie. Did you get that vibe at all, or not really?
No, I don't think Andor really helped me understand anything for Star Wars. So, uh,
I'm trying to take a positive from it because I know you and I both were not very much a fan of that show.
I feel like this movie. So, one of the things that Sarah and I was talking about when we rewatched this movie, and we were talking about, this movie was handled by the same guy that handled Andor because Andor was his character, so he had full control over what he was doing with that story. And we were talking and we were thinking, like, if this movie had as much time to, like, as much uh, screen time as Andor did, it probably would have been more like Andor, where there was way too much character development and very little action. Whereas when the director was said, or he said, you have just over 2 hours, make an exciting Star Wars movie with this substance. Because really, in my opinion, this movie for Rogue One, the first half is a lot of character development, and then the second half is all the action and a little bit more character development. Um, but you almost see a pattern with this movie as you did with the like chunks of three with Andor, because there would be like 2 episodes of character development, and then the third episode was when all the action happened. 2 episodes of character development, then the action happened. And so I kind of feel like what's happening, especially it's even the time frame is the same if we were to do 3 episodes for like this movie would be representative of 3 of the Andor episodes in length. It's the same thing. Good chunk of the movie is character development, and you get action at the end. Except the action in this movie was way better than the Andor stuff. Way better. um, you know, Andor is something where I don't really want to revisit at all, whereas Rogue One I would definitely rewatch. Um, I feel like I feel like Rogue One felt more like Star Wars than Andor did. So
I think some of that's in the pacing. The pacing of this movie was a lot better than the pacing of Andor. Andor was excruciatingly slow.
well, there's the pacing, yes, but there's also Rogue One was also deemed as a very, very dark Star Wars film because, things are very, very gloomy in the sense of the rebellion is not in a good place compared to the Empire. And even though this movie is deemed to be a very, very dark Star Wars film, and Andor is, supposed to be this dark, gritty show as well, Rogue One still had the charm of some of the comedic pieces in it as well. Like they were sprinkled in just enough to have the Star Wars charm, but still we had this sense of things are not good right now for the rebellion. Things were conveyed better in this film. Like I'll never forget. Why are you putting a bag over my head? I am blind, stuff like that. Or K2SO, he was hilarious. He was a great supporting actor character to our main characters. So you can't say it can't be done because it can be. It's just that we chose not to.
And
But
it can
it's
be done well too.
yeah. Not to mention, we had the coolest scene at the very end. Um, we, as far as like things that we really got to expand on with this movie, because number one, I've said on this YouTube channel before, if I'm going to consume some Star Wars shows, books, whatever, I need some substance. I need to like add something to, my interpretation or understanding of Star Wars. We got a live action version of Vader's Castle, which we've seen in other shows now as well, like Kenobi. Uh, we what was that? It was on the tip of my tongue. Oh, we saw a couple of things like with Scarif, like the building that's holding all the different plans for um the Empire, and supposedly that was the same place that had the beginning works of the being able to track ships through hyperspace. When we learn about that in The Last Jedi, we got different types of droids with K2SO, droids that were effective and cool, not DO, which is a donut and a styrofoam cup. Um, we
Which
just
is
got
sad because there was way more toys for DO than there was for K2SO.
oh yeah, oh yeah, definitely. And also to be fair, saw way more DO toys on the clearance shelf as well. Didn't see as
True.
many K2SOs. Whenever we looked for new figures in the stores, we always saw Cassian, Jyn Erso, and Krennic. Those were the 3 that were always on the shelf, and for some reason, uh, they never brought out the other characters because those weren't the only ones that were released, of course, but they were the ones that were always left on the shelf, which is funny because they're like the 3 main people.
I think now that you say that, I remember seeing a lot of the Jyn Erso Black Series figures at Five Below.
Yep.
That they were so mass produced that they wound up going to Five Below. And those at that point in time were, what would you say, retail like $15 to $18?
In the store,
Yeah.
like normal retail,
Yes, when they came out.
normal retail was $20.
$20. Okay. I know the prices have gone up on those quite a bit since then. But so normally $20 and then at Five Below for $5. So yeah, yikes.
Yeah. A lot of Jen Erso and a lot of Cassian at Five Below. I didn't see as many Krennics at Five Below, but I did see our, two main heroes at Five Below quite a bit. Well, that is our little intro to kind of, well, we talked a little bit about Andor too, but just trying to set the tone of like what was going on during the time when this movie came out. What were the expectations? Oh, I remembered the one other thing that was kind of new to this movie. The opening. The opening is different. There is no crawl. It does say a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then it does like a punch of music to grab your attention, and then you just kind of watch, and then a little bit later it'll say, Rogue One in the like Star Wars font, and then they carry on with the movie. So almost like the opening crawl is like that beginning scene, which is kind of an interesting way to do it. But when we come back, we will talk about our tough love for this movie, so stick around. Have you seen The Mandalorian? Do you wonder what Operation Cinder was that they mentioned in this show? Well, we got you covered because we have an entire playlist dedicated to the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign, which highlights Operation Cinder. So if you check out our playlist, you'll be able to see what actually happened with Operation Cinder and know what they're talking about with the show. Now back to ours. Welcome back, everybody. We are now talking about our tough love section for Rogue One. And Sarah is very adamant on wanting to go first. So, Sarah, what is your tough love for Rogue One?
I want to say this before I forget because we were just talking about it before the break, and that is the opening crawl. So I know when we talked about Solo, the Star Wars story, right? And then same thing with this one. Both of them do not have an opening crawl. What the heck? It is a Star Wars movie. You should have an opening crawl. That's like a Star Wars thing. I don't care that it's a one-off movie. If you're going to use the same long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, clearly you wanted to show some connection to the original films. Why wouldn't you just do a regular opening crawl? Oh, it drives me nuts.
A great question, and one filled with passion. I think like we talked about with Solo, the studio wanted to be a little bit different. They wanted some way to separate these movies from the mainstream mainline movies. I don't remember. We didn't cover the Clone Wars movie, like the one that sets up with like Ahsoka and everything. I can't remember if they did an opening crawler or not. I'm very curious to find out now, though. Anyways, yeah, this was the very first movie from Disney that did not have an opening crawl, and I get it. I get why they want to separate it from the main series, but at the
But
same time,
the movie is part of the main series, though. It is part of the main. It might not be number one, two, three, four, whatever, but it is part of that same storyline.
yes and no. The
They
reason why.
literally gave the plans to Leia, which is how the episode 4 starts.
This is where I'm at. Okay, this is where I'm at. The main Star Wars films are about the Skywalker family. This has nothing to do with the Skywalker family. This has to do with, hey, hold on. This only has to do with how did the rebellion get the Death Star plans? Was Vader involved? Very, very little, yes. But did it add anything to the Skywalker story? No, not at all. What is your rebuttal?
It's how Leia got the plans, and she is Leia Skywalker.
I don't care. She's Leia Organa right now.
I think we should move along.
Move along.
Move along.
Move along.
What tough love do you have, Jeremy?
My tough love is that the first half of this movie is absolutely boring to quite a quite a big degree. Um, there's a couple of action sequences, but I feel like if you can get past the first hour or so, then you get rewarded for being invested in it. But sitting through that first hour is kind of it was all right. Like I remember when we first left the theater, I was feeling that way, and I still feel that way to a point. Um, something that kind of goes along with that, and you mentioned this during our rewatch recently, was how many times they bounce between planets so much in the very beginning. It's kind of hard to keep track of. I know they put like a little name in the bottom corner of where they're at, but it's like, my goodness, they're getting so many different plot points ready with just, I don't know, 20 to 30 minutes. It was kind of crazy.
They did jump around a lot to like 4 or 5 different planets back to back to back. It was, as you said, crazy.
Yeah.
Um, One
I'm
of
all
the
right.
things that I'm not a super fan of is the whole Saw Gerrera character. And this has nothing to do with the actor. I know we always like to make sure that that's very clear, anytime we're picking on certain characters and whatnot. It's got nothing to do with the actor. For me, it's he's like part of the rebellion, but he's not part of the rebellion. And it's just like an extra drama piece thrown in kind of for no reason. And then the way his character dies because he just doesn't want to run anymore. Like, okay, so I guess you're not part of you don't care about, boy, you're awfully twitchy. I'm gonna finish what I'm saying first, then you can respond. But
That's one of the rules here. You get to finish what you're saying, and then you get destroyed. No.
um the way he just gave up on life without, caring for anything, like he seemed to have an extreme amount of power without really being granted it, and then he just gave up for nothing. Like, does his character even accomplish anything? Was there any point to him other than he was the one who, um, quote unquote, saved Jin Urso, even though he abandoned her too?
He also had the hologram that her dad left behind.
Anybody could have had that.
Could they?
Didn't that come from the pilot?
Yeah, because he was looking for Saw Gerrera.
I continue with what you'd like to say. I still think he's pointless.
So a couple of things I will say about it, um, both I guess good and bad. Um, I'm gonna tell you what a lot of our Star Wars friends hate to hear, and that is to understand it a little bit more, you have to see some of the TV shows like the Clone Wars or Rebels, maybe read some of the books or at least hear about what happens in them. Because Saw Gerrera was kind of like, if I were to describe what he was, I would say, like, if I were to compare it to maybe the American Revolution or the Patriot movie that we really like, I would say that Rebellion is like the United States that's fighting against the British. Saw Gerrera is like Mel Gibson's character, where they don't necessarily do the formal stuff. They're just kind of going around and doing what they can to hurt the enemy, so to speak. So he's kind of like a guerrilla rebel fighter, so to speak. Um,
What did he accomplish
in the movie or in the shows?
in the movie?
In the movie, all he really accomplished was relaying the information to Jin and saving her, I guess, like you said.
So is there any reason, realistically, based on the movie, that the pilot couldn't have just gone and talked to, say, Mon Mothma, for example, or literally anyone else?
What mm, I would say maybe, because he was basically, wasn't he an Imperial defect? He was a pilot that left with the plans from the Empire. Like he was kind of a spy-ish, and then Galen Urso gave him the plans and said, "Take this to Saw Gerrera." Now, if he showed up to Mothma or somebody that was full on rebel and they saw that some sort of defector was coming up to them, I think they'd be a little more worrisome. Maybe. I don't know. I'm going down a rabbit hole, I feel like.
I hear you, and maybe, but this is my tough love, and I don't like his character.
Oh, and you have your right to do that. I will say there's another thing, speaking of Saw Gerrera, one thing that I'm curious about is when we were watching Andor, it seemed that he was working fairly well, with what's his face, the shop owner. I forget his name. Uh,
Ooh, I
and
don't remember.
and he worked well with the rebels. And they mentioned something in Rogue One that Saw Gerrera's. Oh, this is probably why they mentioned that Saw Gerrera's relationship with the rebellion was very shaky. Like they didn't say what he did, but they said it wasn't on good terms. So that's probably why um they went to Saw Gerrera and not the rebellion. But I want to know what happened between Andor season 1 and Rogue One that made Saw Gerrera not on good terms with the rebellion. Let's see, what's some other tough love that I got? Let's say there's a handful of good things I have. I'm trying to think of the bad things. Really, my main complaint, well, yeah, my main complaint was the how it was kind of dragging in the very beginning. But I would say the other thing I really didn't like was the merch. It doesn't really have much to do with the movie, but the merchandising was kind of bland. Like these characters, I feel like what they're wearing doesn't look anything outside of like regular citizens, so to speak. Like they don't look to stand out. So one of the things that was kind of crappy about the figures is I felt that they looked like generic Star Wars dude number 1, generic Star Wars dude number 2. So the merchandising really wasn't my thing.
I think part of that, though, is that their characters were specifically supposed to blend in with the crowd. Like
yeah,
that was a goal, and that's actually kind of one of the comedy points that K2SO almost makes fun of them for because they left him behind on the ship because they are just going in to blend in, and they thought he would stand out too much. And then he later goes to help rescue them because there was all these explosion noises because clearly they weren't blending in like they were supposed to.
right. Any other ones that you didn't like about it?
Um, I mean, so I talked about Saw Gerrera, I talked about the opening crawl. We kind of briefly touched on how the beginning slash first half is kind of slow moving. Aside from jumping planet to planet, like the storyline is kind of slow moving. Um, I don't know that there's really a whole lot more to mention tough love wise. I'm trying to not get into things that I do like quite yet because I'm trying to save that for the next segment.
Well, why don't we just roll into the next
Okay.
segment? All right. After we come back, we'll roll into the things we really liked from the movie. So stay tuned. Have you ever wondered what it's like to grow up during the prequel era? Do you wonder what type of merchandise was around then? How different was it than it is now? Check out our videos on this channel where we talk about the merchandise of The Phantom Menace and the merchandise of Attack of the Clones. They are here on this channel. The Phantom Menace is my first video ever on YouTube, so there's a special place in my heart for that one, so please, if any, check that out. Now back to our show. All right, welcome back. We are here to talk about the things we really liked about Rogue One. I'll kick it off with something very small, but also absolutely amazing in this movie, is Darth Vader. So Darth Vader,
You would.
yeah, impressive. But he not only is in the film, but he is still voiced by James Earl Jones, which is really cool. They paid a lot of attention to what Vader looked like in episode 4 to make it representative in this movie, considering that it's, right up next to A New Hope when it ends. What I mean by that is his red lenses for his eyes. So it's a really cool touch. Can't remember if our Vader helmet has red lenses. I think it does. Um, but we get to see Vader's castle, like I mentioned in the very beginning of this the Shoot the Sheev podcast. So it was really cool to see his castle for the very first time in live action. But we cannot forget about the ending of this movie with Vader. If there isn't an iconic, I would probably say this is the most iconic moment that Disney made for Star Wars. And that was in the hallway in the I think it's the Tantive 4, I think is the name of the ship. He's in the hallway and he just rips through these rebels. He even puts a rebel on the ceiling and cuts him in half. Like, whoa, like this is what we needed from Vader. I felt like once we saw this segment, us as the audience had a reason to fear Vader. Like, oh my God, that guy is scary. Whereas, like, if you put that segment up against most of the stuff in the original trilogy, it doesn't really compare as far as him being super evil. Yes, he chokes out a couple of people here and there in the original trilogy, but does he just rip through a bunch of rebels with his lightsaber? No, we never saw that in the original trilogy. So I thought it was really cool how they kind of gave us a reason to fear him. And honestly, I want to see more of that. I want to see more of, why was Vader feared in the galaxy? And then we got more of it in Kenobi, like when he was walking through the town and just someone looked at him the wrong way, so he snapped their neck. It's giving us those reasons of this guy is scary, and Disney's doing a pretty good job of painting that picture in Star Wars. So my first thing that I really liked about this movie, hands down, Darth Vader. What's one of yours?
Um, well, we kind of already touched on K2SO, so I'm gonna touch on that a bit more. Him being the droid that's kind of Cassian's sidekick, if you will. This was one of the things I was most excited about the Andor show for
Yeah,
because I like this character so much, which led me to be very disappointed in Andor because he is not in that show, at least in season 1 at all, not even for a second. But from this movie, I think he adds he's a good sidekick, right? He helps Cassian quite a bit with various things, even when Cassian says he doesn't need help, and really he does. And that's kind of a good sidekick quality. But also the comedic relief. He's got a lot of good one-liners. Like from not trusting Jyn Erso with a gun to saying, sounds like a lot of explosions for somebody trying to blend in. He talks about the odds, kind of like C3PO does, which, in a situation where they're very near death, it's a very kind of down type thing, but it's almost kind of comical how he keeps adjusting the odds based on different things that are happening, and Cassian tells him to shut up because he doesn't want to, kind of like Han Solo, doesn't want to know the odds. Let's just get through this. Um,
it's
he
high.
just has a lot. He just has a lot of cool things that he says, and I feel like his character looks pretty cool too. Um, you might say he's kind of basic because he's kind of like in a humanoid type form and just painted mostly black, but I don't know, it's kind of a sleek look.
I liked him a lot. Um, aside from obviously Vader in Rogue One, I would say that my favorite new character, hands down, K2SO. Um, I felt like his character stole the show, honestly, with all the different things he was saying. Um, I was also disappointed that he wasn't in the Andor show. my guess is because the Andor show keeps shrinking. I think it's only going to be 2 seasons now, and they have to show how Cassian got K2SO in the second season. There's if they don't fill that in, what the heck are they doing? Were you gonna say something?
I could give you another one.
Oh, I was gonna take a turn.
Go ahead.
Then the next one that I want to say that I really liked was the music. This was not a mainline Star Wars film. Like it didn't say episode whatever in the title. So I feel like aside from the opening crawl, they also try to set themselves apart with the music because I think this is the first Star Wars project that didn't have John Williams scoring the music. Pretty sure. I'm gonna look that up really quick.
While you're looking that up, I don't remember the music being something like super outstanding for myself, but I also don't remember it being like dull and boring. I guess what I kind of mean from that is it just sounded like normal Star Wars music to me. You know, there's a lot of high intensity action scenes that call for that certain Star Wars type sounds, from a music standpoint, not like laser sounds, but uh what'd you find?
He was not the one that composed the music, but he did get credit for um, inspiring the music because you hear the Star Wars themes played throughout, so like he gets credit for that kind of stuff. Um,
Gotcha.
just like when the credits roll and it says characters based on or characters based on story written by George Lucas or whatever, that type of thing that's written in the credits. It was kind of like that. But yeah, the guy that was ultimately in charge was not John Williams. So this was the first one where John Williams was not the head person for the music, and I think they did a pretty good job with still making it feel very emotional and uh, created some buy-in to the film. Like at the end of the near the end of the movie, when all the stuff is going crazy, and it's like that the place is about to be blown up by the Death Star. The music is on point. Like the music adds so much to feeling for, basically Jin and Andor as they basically look at this force that's just about to kill them. Um,
It's
stuff like
interesting as you bring that up. I can almost hear the ending music like in my head.
Yeah. So they established, in my opinion, a really cool theme song for Rogue One. That's not just the Star Wars theme that you typically think of. It did set itself apart in that department. So, my second thing that I really liked about this film was the music. What was the next one you had?
So I'm gonna do a twofer because there are
Super.
two characters that I think I liked not as much as K2SO, but I feel like they both deserve some attention kind of equally. The first one being the blind guy, which his character name is really difficult to pronounce based on how it's spelled, and I don't remember how they say it in the movie. So it's something along the lines of Churu Imwe, but he's at his the actual actor that plays that character is Donnie Yen, which we actually saw recently in John Wick 4, so that was pretty cool. But his character, from the fact that he is a martial artist, which I think is really cool and interesting, but also, like you mentioned during the first part of this podcast when you were talking about how he said, "Why are you putting a bag over my head? Can't you see I'm blind?" So he's got a couple little things in there here and there too. Just his pure faith for the Jedi way. I'm one of the Force is with me. I think that's really inspirational and cool and interesting. The other one that I'm going to bring up is Krennic. He is one who is almost kind of like your classic crybaby villain, if you will. And I feel like that's probably not what you thought I was going to say, but it's done in a way that's um it's not too much to the point where it's annoying, but like one of the famous lines that he says that Jeremy and I will sometimes say to each other without even trying to reference this movie is when oh, what's the other guy's name?
But Tarkin was trying to take credit.
Yes, my achievement, not yours. It's just a classic line. And that's just kind of the way that that guy had about himself. He held himself up very high. He didn't want any credit taken away from himself, which who could blame him? But he's almost a little bit crybaby-ish about it, but not so much that it's annoying. And so I thought his character was well done.
I say there was another line that was kind of, uh, in my opinion, really, really good in this movie that had to deal with Krennic when he was asking Vader that if whatever he's doing is going to be told to the Emperor, like, is he going to get credit for it? And Vader turns around and, well, he starts to choke, and then Vader turns around and says, "Don't choke on your aspirations." And he has his hand, in the formation of choking, with force choke. So that was another like that is Star Wars love, in my opinion. Like that is what I enjoy. It's it's fun, it's cool, it's funny. Vader got puns, yo.
uh,
I really liked Krennic as well. Just from the very beginning of the movie, like every time I watch it, it's just like it's hard to look away from him. I think that's how good he did with his character, the actor. I also, when you were mentioning the phrase that we like to say, and then you said right before that that he is kind of like a baby. Every time he says that line in the movie, I kind of cringe a little bit because it sounds like he's being a whiny baby in front of all these very important Empire people, and it's like, could they have shot that again and have him do it a little differently? But at the same time, it kind of fits because of how he is in the movie, I suppose. You
he's
know,
upset somebody's trying to steal his thunder. He wants to be the top dog. He wants to be the one impressing everybody.
yeah. Well, Tarkin just wants to steal it. Which leads me to the next thing that I think was really cool about this film was the technology that they used to bring Tarkin back. That was a shock factor in the movie theater. Like, I knew that that actor was dead. And then when he came up on screen, oh my goodness. Like, that was Disney flexing their technology muscles right there. Star Wars in itself is known for pushing boundaries in film. This is the next one that they were doing. Uh, the guy that played Tarkin was not the main actor for it, but he looks similar, and then they CG'd over his face so that he did look like Tarkin. And I don't know if they just basically put his voice into a machine and created it, or how they did that stuff, but um, I know recently they made a deal with James Earl Jones where they can optimize his voice to do whatever they want for Vader, so that, heaven forbid, whenever he passes away, they can still use his voice as Darth Vader, which will be a very, very sad day, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I really liked Krennic. I really liked the technology that they used for Tarkin, because that is pushing everything forward. I mean, even if you look now at the new Indiana Jones movie, which Lucasfilm is a part of, and Disney owns Lucasfilm. I don't know if Disney, well, maybe Disney does own Indiana Jones now because they own Lucasfilm. Anyways, you can see the de-aging that's really, really good in that trailer for the new movie. So Disney's putting in some work to advance this type of technology.
Well, and they kind of had the same thing, didn't they, with Leia?
Yep, Leia and Luke.
What about Mon Mothma?
No.
In Rogue One specifically.
Oh, I think it was a different actress.
It was a different actress. Okay, I wasn't sure.
I think the Rogue One actress is the same person that does the Andor show? Question mark.
I don't know, but I'd be curious to find out. So,
I think so. I have Rogue One pulled up, so I can. Yeah, she plays Mothma in Andor.
okay. Well, they picked somebody that looked very, very similar.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Oh, another really cool thing. The battle at the end. Oh my goodness, the battle on Scarif, like on land and up in space. Really cool. We had a new like I don't know, battle threat is the way to say it, but like how there's this shield that kind of went around the planet, and to get through it, you had to go through that one little spot where the ring was, and because they closed it off, nobody could go in or out of the planet. So they had like that crazy dynamic. And then it had to open up for them to be able to send the plans up. Um, that was a really cool way of um, adding some more to things we haven't seen on screen for Star Wars battles, let alone when they brought in the Hammerhead Corvette and it pushed a Star Destroyer into another Star Destroyer, and then that Star Destroyer is the one that destroyed the shield. I mean, that was awesome.
Can I just say kudos to them for not having this movie end with a kiss? Like the world's about to end, or this planet, and Jin and Cassian are giving each other a hug because they accomplished what they needed to as much as they possibly could anyway, because they don't know what's going on up in space. But they transmitted what they needed to and they did their part, and so they're hugging their accomplishment and one final embrace before death, but they don't kiss like another recent Star Wars movie that ended kind of cringy.
Rise of Skywalker.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like in that moment, really what people would need is a hug.
It,
And
it seemed like an appropriate reaction.
yeah, just holding each other, and Jin, well, Andor did the gentleman thing where he's the one that looked off in the distance and made sure that Jin didn't see it coming, kind of a thing. Um,
I thought Jen was the one facing it.
I thought it was Andor.
I think
I
she I
I
think
would look
she
it up.
faced it.
We have some debate here.
Who's going to be correct? Is it me as always or Jeremy as sometimes?
Wow. Hey Sarah,
Yes.
don't choke on your aspirations.
This is my accomplishment, not yours.
It will be. All
I
right.
don't
I
think
need to
so.
mute it because I don't want it to play over. You were right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we hear that one more time for the channel?
When we come back, we're going to talk about and wrap up the last few things here on our Rogue One segment. So stay tuned. Have you ever wondered what Amazon coffins are and what they're full of? Well, we got you covered here on the channel. Check out our playlist of our Amazon coffin unboxings, where Sarah and I open up boxes that have Amazon returns, and we share with all of you what we get in each of those boxes. If you ever wanted to get into liquidation and want to know what types of things you can find, check us out. Now back to our show. All right, everybody, welcome back. We are here for our final segment talking about Rogue One. We're just going to wrap up the video, talk about some loose ends about what's going on here.
Jeremy, I was wondering if there was any video game relations with this movie. I know a lot of the times when we talk about these other various movies, there's either, a Lego game based on it or something, some sort of video game, board game based on some of these movies. Did this one have any video game relations?
I know for Lego Star Wars, they had like a DLC pack where you can just be the characters. Like you didn't get to play through the levels per se, but you did get to have some of the characters. I think that was, can't remember if that was Force Awakens or if that was Skywalker Saga. It was one of the two. Um, I want to say it was Skywalker Saga. So yeah, and Lego Star Wars, you got a little bit of that. But there was also, when this movie came out, Star Wars Battlefront 1 was the current EA Star Wars shooter that was out. And they did a map for Scarif, and they also did, I think, some sort of like they did a space map as well, but um I think it was the final DLC that that game got, but they kind of tried to mimic, what was going on in the movies where, you're trying to get the plans and then you have to run out of the base and get them to a checkpoint and try to secure the stuff. I did think the DLC was pretty cool. My favorite part was being able to be Krennic. He had a really nice gun. Like his pistol was really cool. Um, I think there was also the option to be Jinner. So uh, one of the cool things that she had is she has like a little baton thing like cops have that she could smack people with. I think she uses it in the movie too at one point, but she like smacks a couple of stormtroopers. Um, I think what the saddest part about that was that when Battlefront 2 came out, you would think they would, at least keep the assets that they've already been working with in their next game. Rogue One did not make an appearance in Battlefront 2. So that was kind of unfortunate. I wish it did. Heck, I wish they had a Battlefront 3 coming out. That's one of my favorite games. I sunk a lot of hours into that. Um, But as far as video game stuff, that's kind of as far as that extent goes. You do get to see K2 droids, not necessarily K2SO, but you get to see K2 droids in Fallen Order. And then also, my guess is that they'll be in Jedi Survivor as well, because I think we saw a Black Series figure at GameStop for a K2 droid that was in Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, I think that sounds familiar too. Um, one of the things you brought up reminded me of something else I was going to bring up, which is Scarif and the beach scene. So that was one thing that I thought was pretty cool with this movie was, we've done deserts, we've done forests slash jungles, but I don't think we've really seen like a tropical beach setting. So to
Right.
see, huh?
I said right.
Oh, thank you. Get used to saying that. Um, so to see a place that's so tranquil and, like nice and serene, and then have it just be a total battleground and flip the script like that, I thought that was an interesting combination to have.
Yeah. Which is another kind of cool line of from Krennic when the island is just blowing up in random places, and he's like, "Are you blind? Deploy the garrison," because everybody's just standing there watching the Empire stuff explode, and nobody's doing anything.
Of course, there's the cheesy line in the movie too, where they're like, what ship is saying this? And they can't think of what fake ship name to give, so they wind up saying Rogue One.
They,
Rogue One? That's not a
they,
ship name.
they said the thing. They said the thing.
It's one of those things where it's like almost too cringy, but still, oh, it's just weird. It's just cringy.
Yeah. One thing that is kind of cool about this movie, if you didn't know, we did a video a while back, and it was actually probably one of our more popular videos when this channel first started, was there was a Darth Vader lightsaber released by Disney, where it was one of the expensive lightsabers. And unfortunately, I don't have it anymore because little quick story before we get into why the lightsaber is cool. The lightsaber was supposed to come with a plastic stand, and because it was missing like the little hook thing that's supposed to go around the lightsaber to hold it in place, they wanted me to send the whole thing back. And then they never sent me a replacement. And then it went out of print. So now I don't have one anymore. But what was really cool about the lightsaber was that it had like these brown smudge marks on the hilt, and you kind of like, is there something wrong with this? What's going on? Because it on the box it said Darth Vader Rogue One lightsaber. And the really cool thing about this was that at some point, instead of Vader just doing the thing, on up in space with the rebels, there was a point where in the script Vader was supposed to be with the Empire and storm the beach, murdering the rebels. And the lightsaber was supposed to be reflective of that because there was supposed to be mud from the beach on his hilt.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah, I wish we would have gotten both. Like maybe he slaughters a bunch of people on the beach and then he hears about the plans being transmitted, so he hops in a ship and then flies up there, kind of a thing. I feel like that would have been great.
Yeah.
Um, but there was an opportunity to have a lightsaber of something that was left on the cutting room floor. I wish I still had mine, but unfortunately, I do not.
And they're probably going for a ridiculous amount of money now because they're not in print.
They probably are.
How much do you think that lightsaber retailed when it was actually in print?
I think it was like $200.
Because it came with a blade, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, well, it's out of stock. And say there was a third party seller trying to sell them on Walmart's website for like 239, which isn't too far off, but they're not in stock. So yeah, that's another little piece of like behind the scenes type stuff that you really wouldn't know unless you dive into it a little bit, especially if you bought the lightsaber and then you saw those smudge marks and were thinking like, what the heck? What's going on with my lightsaber? Someone's selling one. Let's see, is this the right one?
Makes me wonder how many people returned them thinking it was just dirty.
Yeah. There's one on eBay right now, but it's used. It says excellent shape, complete minty fresh outer box, shows wear. But it ends up being, I don't know, like 250, 260 after all said and done. So
Oh, because all the shipping and whatnot. Those hilts, I'm sure, not hilts, the blades, I'm sure, are hard to ship without, you know, protecting them so the glass doesn't break or plastic or whatever material it is.
well, it all came in one box. So
Yeah, but you think of how many packages get thrown around and stuff like that.
yeah. So if you want that kind of piece of memorabilia from the films, check those out. Check out our video. The video was from when I did have it, and then now I don't. I bought a separate one. I got like when they started releasing the legacy lightsabers online, that's when I bought my Vader hilt, which I do recommend, and it's awesome.
Are they the same hilt, just one has dirt smudges?
As far as I know. Yep. Nowadays, so like that Darth Vader set, nowadays I think you can get the Skywalker lightsaber set. And there's one other one Kylo Ren is usually the other one that's up there because Disney wants to sell all sequel stuff. They want to put it in your face. And there's actually rumor that the next movie is actually going to be episode 10 and not something else. Which we should be finding out very soon because Star Wars Celebration is only like 2 weeks away. They're supposed to be revealing news about movies there.
I'm excited to see what's coming next.
Same. I think. Oh, I don't know how I forgot about this. I should have mentioned this in the things that I really liked. The way that they were so in the space battles, they had the like captains or who I don't know how you want to describe them, but the same pilots that were in episode 4, A New Hope, back in the 70s, they were able to like pull the image of the person out of that and put him in a new image, so that it looked like the people from episode 4 were a part of the squadrons in Rogue One, like the same actors, same age, everything, because continuity, they're supposed to be the same age between the two movies. So I thought that was really cool too. If there's one thing that Rogue One accomplished, it was like being on point with the technology usage. Um,
It's all in the details.
yeah, they gave a lot of love to this story for sure, which is probably why this movie was, I want to say it was ranked higher than The Last Jedi, but I guess I can't count my chickens. I haven't looked it up. But it definitely was rated higher than Solo. Are you looking it up?
Yes, I am looking it up.
One thing
Trying
that
to
was
check.
kind of confusing between Rogue One and Solo was that Jyn Erso looked a lot like Kira from Solo. So people were wondering if there was some sort of relation there, but turns out there's not.
What was the one you were trying to compare it to?
Rogue One compared to The Last Jedi.
So Rogue One on Rotten Tomatoes got an 84 to 87%, being, critic versus audience.
Yep.
And The Last Jedi, the critic score was a 91. So the critic score was better, but the audience score was a 42.
Man,
Well,
the critics were on dope that night.
yeah, The Last Jedi did very badly compared to Rogue One on an audience score level.
To be fair, we will be getting to The Last Jedi as far as one of these segments, so we'll probably reserve ourselves for talking about The Last Jedi when we get there. We still have a handful of movies before we actually get there, so hold on tight. We definitely have an opinion about The Last Jedi, both good and bad stuff. But for this video, was there anything else you wanted to mention about Rogue One?
Yeah, I guess just to wrap it up, it was kind of one of our first one-off movies without being a one-off movie because some of the character or at least storyline continued from story that we had heard from before. I feel like they did the story justice and that there was enough action to keep me engaged, at least for the second half of the movie. The first half, kind of jumped around a bit, but it was okay. Um, I feel like the good outweighed the bad, and that's usually a good indicator of a good movie, right? Hopefully there's more good than bad. Um, and I liked the amount of comedic relief in this movie. I feel like it was just enough without being over the top.
Nice. I thought it was a really good first non-episodic film for Star Wars. It was a good first impression. Kind of like you said, even though there was some things that were like, I don't know about that. Um, Overall, it was a good representation of what could, expand outside of the main movies that we watch. And honestly, if the movies were given as much care as they were from this film to their new projects, that don't have to do, excuse me, with the episodes, they'd probably make some pretty good movies. So my hope is that they look back on the things that were good about what they were doing when they were making Star Wars movies. When they made 5 of them so far. So um, they kind of like steamrolled through the movies. So I hope that this movie sheds some light on what was good about doing that whole process. But that is our video, our Shoot the Sheep podcast on Rogue One for this week. If you enjoyed this type of podcast, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you are notified when the next one drops. They typically drop on Wednesdays, so look out for those. Also, if you like the video, drop us a like and also drop us a comment letting us know your thoughts on Rogue One. What were your impressions when this first came out, especially since, it was the first non-episode movie? Let us know if we're right or wrong on our opinions, all that good stuff. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.